3 centuries after the first discoveries, Egypt continues to fascinate us. Every month that goes by reveals new treasures buried under the desert sand.
This fragment of nose was found in the area during an archaeological dig, so it was stuck back on. It hadn't gone far.
Temples, pyramids, necropolises, and ancient cities are just some of the wonders that bear witness to the splendor of past pharaohs and their heirs.
The Greeks used to make cakes called pyramids. When they came to Egypt, they found the colossal stone structures in the shape of their cakes, so they gave them the same name.
This ancient civilization, which was thought to have been lost, is constantly reinventing itself in the Egypt of the 21st century. We are going to travel through time and space to rediscover it. The cult of death played a crucial role in ancient Egypt. With its necropolises, pyramids, mummies and sarcophaguses, 3/4 of archaeological discoveries on Egyptian soil are directly linked to funeral rites. The ancient Egyptians loved life so much that they hoped to be able to enjoy it. Even after their death, they would mummify themselves to make their bodies last forever. Their burial places were built like dwellings, with the walls painted in colors associated with life. But that was not enough. The deceased also had to appear before Osiris, the god of the dead, who would judge their actions and decide whether or not to grant them eternal life. This age-old notion of judgment after death has not disappeared. In Egypt, both Christians and Muslims hope to be among the chosen few when the final judgment comes. Today, as in the past, death is not seen as an end for believers. In Luxor, the wedding season has begun. Couples marry in the shade of this ancient Egyptian temple. It is the start of summer, when temperatures rise to over 45 degrees centigrade. To protect themselves, people start work very early in the morning. This is the best time of day to spread the word. Trucks like these, with their makeshift loudspeakers, are often the only link between small, neighboring rural communities.
Caliph Mahmud, Caliph Hassanan has departed. May he rest in peace through the mercy of God. He is from the village of Najer Seke. His burial will take place at 3 o'clock. Before afternoon prayers. I am announcing the death of a Muslim to villagers. I am making this announcement so that everyone in the surrounding villages knows that this person has died. If I don't announce it through the loudspeakers, no one will come to his funeral because no one will have been informed. I have been doing this for 25 years, but it is not my real job. My real job is to do the call to prayer at the mosque. I was chosen because I have a good voice. Allahu Akbar is my job. It is very important for people to join the funeral procession and pray for the dead. If they do, they will be rewarded by God. but it is important for the deceased too. As we say here, if 40 people pray for the deceased, they will definitely go to heaven.
Caliph Mahmud died in the night. In accordance with the Quranic tradition, he will be buried the following day. This man was held in high esteem. His friends gather outside his house to pay their last respects. Inside, his family is watching over his corpse. In keeping with tradition, it has been wrapped in a white shroud. The adult males in the family have washed and embalmed the body. He is ready for his final journey to the village cemetery. If Caliph Mahmud had lived in the age of the Pharaohs, he would have been mummified after his death. Mummification was a much more complicated process than embalming. The ancient Egyptians believed that there was life after death, in their own bodies. To see mummies today, you have to travel to the capital. Most of them are to be found in Cairo. Hidden away in the center of this sprawling city, this old museum is their home. The museum's incredible collection still attracts just as many Egyptomaniacs as ever. But the undisputed stars of the museum are the mummies. Some are over 3,000 years old and incredibly well preserved. The bandages have been removed to show off the bodies. That practice dates back to the early days of Egyptology in the 19th century. Nowadays, out of respect for their ancient religion, the mummies are left in their original state. At the museum's laboratory, not a day goes by without Professor Mourning, a distinguished specialist in the restoration of antiquities, handling the mummies. Once they are out of their sarcophagus, he never touches the cardboard casing. It is the final protection before the bandages.
Here we have a mummy in a wooden case, shaped like a human body. Thanks to the funeral mask and the X-rays, we have been able to confirm that this is the mummy of a young woman. She was about 22 years old when she died. On the X-rays, we could also see that she had a fetus between her legs. So that tells us about the possible cause of death. Given her age, there is a strong possibility that she died of a miscarriage. The mummy is in perfect condition, as are the drawings on the case. Some are very rare. Here, for example, we have the god Khnum standing in front of the young dead girl. It is magnificent and very rare.
The origins of mummification are due to chance. 6,000 years ago, Egyptians used to bury their dead in ditches in the desert. They noticed that the sand acted as a very good preservative. Later, their belief in eternal life forced them to find more effective processes to preserve the corpse in the best state possible. For the rich, balms, spices, and bitumen were used. Once the entrails had been removed, corpses were soaked for 70 days in natron, which is a natural salt which absorbs humidity. All of these products cost an absolute fortune.
This is another very rare piece. It is the left arm of a pharaoh, King Unas, from the 5th dynasty. It was discovered by French archaeologist Gaston Maspero at the end of the 19th century. Later, researchers carbon dated the arm. The results confirmed that it came from the Old Kingdom, from about 2350 BC. Examinations under the microscope revealed the presence of the resin and linen used during the mummification process. This is hard proof that mummification was already being practiced at that time. But the technique was not perfected until the days of the New Kingdom in the 18th and 19th dynasties.
The techniques of mummification in the 19th dynasty was so effective that 3,200 years after their death, we can still put faces to the names of the major figures in Egyptian history. People like Seti I and his son Ramesses II, one of Egypt's most powerful pharaohs, who reigned for 67 years and died at over 90 years of age. The practice of mummification carried on for centuries and was adapted by all of Egypt's various invaders.
We are working here on a very special mummy, a mummy with a portrait from the Roman era. These are called Fayum mummies, and they existed between the 1st and 5th centuries AD. This one is very special. It is drawn on a red background. There are only 20 like it in the world.
The idea behind the funeral masks covering the faces of Egyptian mummies is that they restore the use of the senses to the dead person. At the end of the Old Kingdom, the masks were replaced with portraits that came straight out of the Greco-Roman artistic tradition. These portraits were commissioned from artists by the living in anticipation of certain death.
It is hard to know exactly when mummification stopped, but there were no mummies between the 5th and 6th century AD. That date corresponds to the rise of monotheistic religions, which forbade this practice.
In the region around Luxor, Caliph Mahmud's remains have reached their final resting place, the cemetery in his village. Only the men take part in the funeral procession. According to the Prophet Muhammad, the hyper-emotionalism of women and children would disturb the sobriety of the funeral. In the Muslim tradition, the burial must take place within 24 hours of death. This is a precaution which makes good sense at these latitudes. The corpse must be carried over a distance of 4 kilometers in temperatures of 45 degrees centigrade in the shade. There is only one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, chants the crowd, swelling as the procession reaches the corpse's final resting place. If the hills overlooking this tiny village cemetery could talk, they would tell us how little these rituals have changed. The Theban hills have seen thousands of funeral processions pass by since the days of the ancient Egyptians. With over 600 tombs recorded, you need a bit of help to find your way around. Sam Michel is a tour guide. Whenever he comes to Luxor, he finds time to visit Ayman's bookshop that specializes in Egyptology and is situated in the midst of the ancient ruins.
I accompany groups and I guide them through Egypt. I try to pass my love of all things Egyptian onto them. You have to keep your knowledge up to date. There are new discoveries every year and new theories. This is my passion, so I try to stay up to date. To do that, I need books, and I need to read.
Even for an avid reader, it would take several lifetimes to uncover all the secrets hidden in the Theban hills. To help make sense of it, Egyptologists have divided the necropolis into 3 parts: the Valley of the Nobles, the Valley of the Queens, and the Valley of the Kings. There are images of funeral processions on lots of graves, but Sama has decided to come to the Valley of the Nobles. With its monumental staircase, the tomb of Ramesses, a vizier under Amenhotep III and Akhenaton, is one of the largest in the area of the necropolis, reserved for nobles. At the back of the tomb, Sameh finds what he is looking for: an image of a funeral procession that is 3,000 years old.
You can see the family members walking together behind the pallbearers. Next, you've got the bearers of the grave goods. Grave goods are the treasures that are placed in the tomb alongside the deceased. The deceased hopes to live the same life after death as they lived on Earth, only better and more carefree. So, they will need to eat and drink and entertain themselves. But they also keep the same job as they had on Earth. So they will need the tools necessary for performing those functions. Here, for example, you can see a leopard skin, which was the attire of a high priest. Ramesses was a high priest, so he needs a priest's robes. Then there is a bed, a mattress, a headrest, and some boxes.
These eclectic grave goods had only symbolic value. They were purely functional. When Howard Carter opened up Tutankhamun's tomb in 1921, the world was amazed to discover the wealth of this young pharaoh, who died at the age of just 19. Nothing had been forgotten. Even his chariot was buried with him. In total, Carter unearthed 5,000 objects from the tomb, estimated to be worth the equivalent of $1 billion. But in the great majority of cases, the grave goods have long disappeared from the tombs of the pharaohs, stolen by generations of grave robbers.
And here we have the mourners. The mourners were very interesting. Here you see women showing their grief and their sorrow. You can see black tears on their cheeks. Their eyes were heavily made up with kohl, so when they cried, the kohl ran down their cheeks.
The tradition for mourners hasn't completely disappeared from Egypt, but Islam forbids the expression of grief through loud wailing. Professional mourners resisted for a long time, but today it is only in remote villages that the tradition persists.
This scene of a funeral procession is on the side wall of the vault. As you can see, it is dug out of the mountainside. This ramp leads down to the vault. The mummy and its grave goods were slid down the ramp and placed in the burial chamber.
Today, as in ancient Egypt, after the funeral procession, the corpse is laid to rest. Caliph Mahmud's burial is over. It is time for the village imam to recite the prayer for the dead. The prayer reminds us that death is part of life and that the deceased will get his due reward on the day of the resurrection. The congregation stands to listen to this final oration. وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور صدق الله العظيم الفاتحة. Throughout the centuries, from the Egypt of the Pharaohs to that of Alexander the Great, funeral rites have continued to evolve. Islam, too, has undergone a transformation over the course of history. One city in Egypt that single-handedly embodies this mixture of genres is Alexandria. The city that was founded by Alexander the Great has retained its cosmopolitan character. Here, you see signs in many different languages: French, Greek, Arabic, and Italian. The city is a thriving Mediterranean port, so its 5 million inhabitants have watched people come and go since the days of antiquity. This melting pot of a city has always had its fans. People like Doa, a tour guide who specializes in Egyptology.
When I was young, I often used to come here with my family during the summer holidays. We would spend our summer holidays on the beaches of Alexandria. The beaches have gone. Sadly, they are rapidly disappearing. The sea level is rising and concrete boulders are strewn on the beaches in an attempt to hold back the sea. I love Alexandria, and I keep bringing tourists here. Sometimes Alexandria is not on their itinerary, but I always try to add it.
Alexandria is steeped in history. Besides the lighthouse, which has disappeared, but was once one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, another archaeological treasure lies hidden in the heart of the city. Discovered in 1900 by accident, when the weight of a donkey caused the ground to cave in, the city's ancient catacombs revealed a whole other world, the world of the dead. It is accessed by a spiral staircase and is arranged over 3 levels. 35 meters underground, visitors find themselves stepping back in time to the Egypt of the 1st to the 4th century AD, with its cosmopolitan funeral customs.
And here we are at the bottom of a well. It was down this shaft that the sarcophaguses containing corpses, or mummies, were lowered into the various levels of the catacombs. And this is where the digging stopped. The spiral staircase would have continued down here. But in 392 AD, all pagan cults were banned, and Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. So, digging was stopped because these rituals were no longer going to be practiced.
The catacombs of Kom el-Shokafa, to use their Arabic name, are a veritable maze. They contain over 300 Greco-Roman tombs, the majority of which are loculi. These burial niches are identical to those found in the catacombs in Rome. The tomb which best symbolizes this mixture of cults and rites is also the first one to be built here in the 2nd century AD.
Here we are in the original tomb where the catacombs began. That is the statue of a man. The body is Egyptian, but the head is Roman, with curly hair and everything. It shows a fusion of art and religion, which is very typical of that era. I'm talking about the 2nd century AD. First, you've got these composite columns, which are typically Greek. And then over here, you've got this Agatha demon, which is typically Greek, but the double crown is Egyptian. And above it is a circle containing a Medusa, which is for the protection of the tomb. According to Greek mythology, Medusa has the power to turn anyone who looks at her to stone. Then the center is very Egyptian. Here you can see a winged sun with a cobra on either side of it. And then this line of cobras, which was very typical of the time and also a symbol of protection. Here we come to the main tomb. It was dug out of the rock along with the lid. The lid does not open. The burial was performed from the back, from outside the chamber. And here we have a carving of Anubis, the ancient Egyptian god of mummification, who was the guardian of the tombs. He is depicted here as a legionary in a Roman style that has nothing to do with Egyptian art.
Today, as in the past, once the funeral is over, the family sits down together to eat. The architects of the catacombs thought of everything. This large, typically Roman room with its U-shaped bench served as a dining room.
The whole family would assemble here. You have to imagine a wooden table over there with waiters passing behind it. Family members would lie on their left-hand side to make room in their stomach so they could fill it to maximum capacity. There would have been wine to accompany the meal. The idea was to share one last meal with the spirit of the deceased.
In ancient Egypt, it wasn't unheard of for the mummy to attend this last meal before returning to its grave. So that it could enjoy the spectacle and the feast, either the oldest son or a priest would perform the ritual of opening the mummy's mouth. It was a magic ceremony that would allow the deceased to breathe, eat, hear and see in the world of the dead.
You were supposed to break the plates you had eaten off when you left the tomb. That is an Egyptian tradition which was practiced in the age of the Pharaohs. The tomb of Tutankhamun was discovered thanks to the unearthing of pieces of pottery marked with his name. These had been used during the last meal his family ate with him before shutting up his tomb and leaving.
Muslims still hold funeral banquets, but there are certain conditions. 3 days after Caliph Mahmud's burial, the period of mourning is officially over. The family can finally eat a meal in his honor. It takes place in the cemetery. It is a frugal and hasty repast, with just one dish served. Caliph Mahmud's body now lies in the ground. His soul will be judged on the day of the resurrection at the end of this world, a last judgment that is customary of monotheistic religions. However, in ancient Egypt, the deceased were judged immediately. Once they were alone in their tomb, they would descend into the underworld to be judged. Their life would continue there, provided they passed several tests first and found a way to survive in the afterlife. That was no mean feat. At the small temple of Hathor in the Theban hills, Egyptians have inscribed instructions on the wall for the newly deceased.
For the ancient Egyptians, death was just a way of passing from this world to the next. And for such a journey, people needed a guide to tell them about the different stages they would encounter. This is one of those stages. It's the weighing of the heart. It's in chapter 125 of the Book of the Dead. The heart is placed on one dish of the scales. And on the other dish, there is a quill pen. It is the quill pen of Mart, the goddess of justice, and the heart had to be as light as the feather. The scales had to balance. If the heart was as light as a feather, that meant the deceased had a clear conscience and could enter the field of reeds, which was the ancient Egyptians' equivalent of paradise. The weighing process is presided over by the god Osiris. If the heart is found to be heavier than the feather, then it will be eaten by a beast known as the devourer. And then the deceased really is dead. Being dead means not being able to continue living in the afterlife. The deceased, depending on their means, had a papyrus placed alongside them in their grave. It was a guide to their journey. Having their guide with them gave them peace of mind. It gave them the formulas they needed to overcome all the obstacles they were going to encounter along the way.
For the dead to take a survival guide with them into the underworld, they needed a medium for those written instructions that was easy to carry. Over 5,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians invented papyrus. The papyrus plant was the emblem of Lower Egypt. Images of papyrus plants were often seen on the walls of temples and tombs. This aquatic plant grew wild in the Nile Delta. Today, it is still grown by some farmers, but harvesting it is not easy. This type of farming is hard to mechanize. The farmers harvest it by hand, their feet in the water. For Sabi and his son Mohammed, it's hard work.
Mohammed, bring the cart.
These scenes look so timeless. In reality, the cultivation of papyrus completely disappeared from Egypt in the Middle Ages. And yet, papyrus had been a luxury product that Egyptians had a monopoly over throughout the Roman Empire until it was supplanted by parchment. Today, and this is very recent, it can be found in some fields again.
Papyrus is a plant that the ancient Egyptians grew long before us. There was nothing much growing on this land, just some very standard crops. But a few years ago, we decided to plant papyrus again.
In the 1970s, some Egyptian botanists started to show an interest in this plant. Legend has it that they reintroduced it after bringing home some plants they found deep in the heart of neighboring Sudan. Once the plant had been reintroduced, the farmers had to revive the methods of the ancient Egyptians to transform it into a material you could write on.
I'm just cutting up the papyrus stems, which will be used to make the sheets of paper. I am cutting them into different lengths to allow us to make sheets of different sizes. Now I'm slicing the stems with a fishing line. I judge everything by eye. The slices need to be identical, more or less the same thickness. The thinner they are, the more beautiful the paper will be. Once they have been moistened, the strips of papyrus need to be aligned and carefully placed on top of one another so that there are no holes in the sheet. It is a job that demands a lot of dexterity.
وبعدين نعمل دي بعد كده لا شوف دي فوق بعضيها كده اساس ان الفراعنه ديت كانوا بيعملوا شيء يعني مش سهل.
Doing this, I realized that the technique the ancient Egyptians invented was incredibly sophisticated. For me, with modern methods at my disposal, it's less hard. But for them, it must have been very complicated.
No one knows the exact process the ancient Egyptians used to make papyrus. Did they use a press like Sabi? It's hard for archaeologists to answer that question, but Sabi's papyrus looks identical to the papyrus that the ancient Egyptians placed in their sarcophaguses.
Look how solid this leaf of papyrus is. You can fold it and unfold it again, no problem. It won't break. It is more solid than a sheet of normal paper. And what's more, it is light and transparent. I sell these sheets to printers or to artists who decorate them and sell them to tourists.
Painting on papyrus takes a very special kind of skill. Artists who do it, like Ahmed, are real experts.
Drawing on papyrus is harder than drawing on traditional paper. Because you can't just rub it out and start again.
Having worked as the official artist on a number of archaeological digs, he turned to this discipline, which took him back to ancient Egyptian times.
I am not an archaeologist, but I can tell you about the art of the ancient Egyptians. They used deep colors and applied several layers of paint. That is why their paintings are so magnificent. They used natural pigments, not chemicals like we use today. They loved bright colors and fixed them properly to the wall. The drawing was very precise. I am interested in all of that, in their line drawings, the fixing process and the pigments. And I try to imitate their art as far as it is possible to do so.
Colour was very important for the ancient Egyptians. Their temples were completely covered with paintings, giving them a garish aspect that they no longer have today. The reason for this was that the pharaoh's subjects were illiterate. They had to be able to recognize the gods at first sight from their colors and costumes. Osiris was painted green, the color of spring, to show that he had overcome death. These painted representations are not lacking in realism, as shown in the difference in the skin color of the two sexes. The men are brown because they lived outdoors, and the women are yellow because they stayed shut up indoors. The animals, too, are represented in a way that is very true to reality. They will be used by the deceased in the afterlife. Who would want to eat a pale imitation of a Nile perch?
Applying thick paint like this tires your hand out. It's not easy imitating the ancient Egyptians, but it's fascinating work. And I derive a lot of pleasure from it.
Painters, stonecutters and sculptors occupied an important role in ancient Egypt. In the Theban hills in the Middle Kingdom, they even had their own village, Deir el-Medina. All the artisans lived together here, building tombs for the pharaohs in the nearby valley. Their own tomb reflect their craft too. They are topped with little pyramids, imitating early royal tombs. A symbol of ancient Egypt, the 3 pyramids of Giza were erected during the Old Kingdom in about 2600 BC. Back then, only the pharaoh had access to eternal life. The pyramid was a sort of launching pad for his soul to join the stars. But paradise gradually became accessible to everyone. Every Egyptian could have a pyramid built, in line with their means. At Deir el-Medina, Sennacherib, chief artisan to Ramesses II, didn't hold back when it came to constructing a tomb for himself. He topped his with a pyramid and paintings worthy of royalty. Sama's favorite thing here is the painting of paradise done by Sennacherib and his contemporaries.
What is so distinctive about this tomb are these vignettes from the Book of the Dead. This one is of what we call the Fields of Aru, which is what ancient Egyptians hoped to find in the afterlife. Namely very fertile fields, where the wheat grows to heights of 3.5 meters and the flax is 2 meters tall. It's a place of abundance. We see them here, working in the fields. That will be one of their jobs in the afterlife. On Earth, they had to dig canals and build dikes and so on. And in the afterlife, it's exactly the same. And so they invented a system to spare themselves this drudgery. These funerary statues were known as ushabati. They had a magic spell cast on them to make them act on behalf of the deceased and go to work in their place. You cannot compare heaven, as we think of it, with today's mentality, to the way it was perceived 4,000 years ago. For the ancient Egyptians, heaven was a place of transition from life on earth to the afterlife, which was everlasting and carefree.
The Egyptians believed in heaven, but they also believed that the dead came back to visit the living. The bar embodies the soul of the deceased. It is represented by a bird with a human head. The bar is a sort of double for the deceased that is set free after death. Like a ghost, it leaves the tomb and flies over the deceased's favorite places, allowing it to participate in life outside the tomb. Then the bar flies back into the tomb and settles on the mummy. In modern-day Egypt, it is more the living who visit the dead than vice versa. Egyptians often pay their respects to their dearly departed. But the resting places of the dead are sometimes disrupted by daily life, especially in the country's capital. In Cairo, the population density is 10 times higher than in London. The population has forced many inhabitants out to the city's cemeteries. The people of Cairo are used to this strange cohabitation. It is not unusual for them to use a grave as a tea tray or a washing line. whole way of life has developed around these tombstones. Hassan is a glassblower, and he lives in this working-class district. No one bats an eyelid on seeing this artisan working here. His workshop opens directly onto one of the graves. Hassan's family has lived in this cemetery for several generations. He is familiar with the habits of all his neighbors, both the living and the dead.
That's Hassan Arabesque's tomb, and Hassan Arabesque is me.
Hassan has built his own tomb on the family plot near to his parents' grave. It is not unusual for Egyptians to build their tombs while they are still alive, just like in the days of the pharaohs.
Personally, I have no problem with death. If I look back, I have lived a good and full life. I have restored my ancestors' tomb, and my children will be proud of what I have achieved. What's more, it's handy. My tomb is a mere stone's throw from my house, but I have to admit, it's nicer here than where I live now. Obviously, not everyone wants to live in a cemetery, but if you fall on hard times and you need somewhere for your family to live, especially your children, at least you can always move here. You get used to living among the dead.
In ancient Egypt, the afterlife was not always as peaceful as it is now. At the bottom of the Valley of Kings, in the Theban hills, generations of grave robbers, attracted by the buried treasures, came to disturb the resting places of the dead. But the pharaoh Ai from the 18th dynasty was the victim of another form of tomb raiding. He was subjected to a campaign of damnation because of a rather troublesome forefather. Akhenaton, the pharaoh who was hostile to the god Amon and a heretic in the eyes of some of his successors. Ai paid dearly for his kinship with the accursed pharaoh. His tomb was methodically ransacked.
You don't need to be a great detective to see that King Ai was murdered in his tomb. The heart has been removed from these images of him. And don't forget that the heart is the conscience. The penis, too, preventing him from reproducing. And the face, which is his identity, so that he is no longer recognizable. Then the hands, and so on and so forth. And so this mutilated king no longer exists, because the ancient Egyptians believed in the magic power of the image. If the image of the deceased was intact, they existed. But if it was erased, they ceased to exist. The idea was to kill Ai, even after his death, to erase all trace of his existence. Even in his tomb, now he will never be reunited with his soul. When his soul returns to his tomb, he will no longer be there. Only then is he really dead. As you can see, they have hammered out the name of the king, which was written on this cartouche. The ancient Egyptians believed in the magic power of the word, as well as of the image. Erasing his name meant that he no longer existed, so he was killed one more time. They hammered out the name, but they didn't succeed in eradicating him completely. 3,000 years later, I'm still saying the name Ai, and so he exists. His name lives on, and so those who tried to kill him failed.
Sameh can name this pharaoh who died 3,000 years ago thanks to the work of archaeologists. By solving the mystery of the hieroglyphs and identifying the mummies they discovered, they have ensured eternal life for the ancient Egyptians. But they are not the only ones. The whole world has contributed. From visitors to the Egyptian Museum to tourists in the souk in Luxor, everyone is contributing to the eternal life of the pharaoh's subjects. And never mind that the pharaoh who has benefited the most from the helping hand of fate is one of the least important pharaohs in the history of Egypt. He died at the age of 19, and his power was very limited. And yet not a minute goes by without someone somewhere in the world mentioning the name Tutankhamun. The most short-lived of the pharaohs will have enjoyed the most enduring posterity.